In this video, I want to talk to you about what I think is the #1 piece of cover for a bass, and that is grass, aquatic vegetation. Whether that is submergent vegetation, vegetation that grows under the water like hydrilla and coontail or milfoil, or emergent vegetation, grass that grows out of the water like reeds or lily pads. It seems like anywhere I go in the country, if I find an area of the lake or whatever it may be that I'm fishing that has a lot of vegetation in it, those are typically the top producing areas. And with all the talk about forward-facing sonars of the world, I also want to tell you today why sometimes grass and forward-facing sonar don't always mix, which is kind of nice because that kind of allows you to be able to go out there and find, groups of fish in the grass that other anglers are not going to find. And today I want to talk about that. Now, this video is brought to you by MILLERTECH batteries. Guys, I partnered with MILLERTECH this year. I could not be happier with their batteries. You would be absolutely blown away if you see me go fishing for 8, 9, 10 hours of a day, come back and check my trolling motor batteries, and they're at literally 88%. Like, I've used hardly anything. Now, I know the big thing with batteries is cost. These are lithium batteries. They are expensive, but in the long run, they are cheaper to run, which is a really, really great thing. Literally, these batteries have a 10-year warranty on them. So you purchase that battery up front. In 8 years, if you're having issues, you send it back and they will send you a new one. And the best thing is that if you are on the market for some lithium, some MILLERTECH batteries, you can get 10% off of your batteries by simply using my code down below in the description. So just click on that link, go shop at MILLERTECH, you'll get 10% off. It's a great deal and they are fantastic batteries. All right, let's talk about grass fishing. Guys, I'm telling you what, I have fished a number of lakes. I mean, I can't even put a hand on it, and I fished everywhere from New York to Mississippi to even in Missouri. I found a lake that had grass in it. I fished it all over the East Coast. I've been all over the place. And what I'm trying to say is that every time that I get to a lake these days, the first thing that I try to look for is grass. It's one of the first things that I want to find, because you can find some of the biggest fish and the biggest schools of bass in the grass. Now, like I talked about a little bit in the intro of this video, depending on what grass that you are fishing, sometimes forward-facing sonar doesn't really help you to catch bass that are in grass. And the biggest reason is that sometimes you just can't see them. Like I fished in milfoil where the bass are up in the milfoil. And even though your forward-facing sonar can somewhat cut through the grass, you can see fish that are on the outside of the grass real well, but you can't always see the fish that are in the grass. Same thing if you're fishing lily pads or reeds. Fish that are way up inside those, you're not going to be able to see them with the forward-facing sonar. And with today's technology, there's really more and more people that are kind of leaning on that. And guess what? They are leaving all the grass for anglers like yourself, like myself, who love to fish it and also know that that's where a lot of big bass come from. And I want to tell you a little bit about a tournament real quick. And this will kind of help just let you know it'll be why you'll know exactly why I love grass so much. Sometimes I really can't talk well, and you guys get a really good picture of that over on this channel. But anyways, a number of years ago, I was fishing on Lake Chickamauga in a Bassmaster Open. Some of you know this story, but some of you don't know the backstory. But I fished for days on end on Chickamauga, trying to locate big offshore schools of bass. Chickamauga, we fished it in May, and it's an offshore bass factory. So I'm looking for, hard bottom. I'm looking for shell beds, rock bottom, brush piles. I'm looking for a ton of that stuff. And I had stumbled upon a couple of schools of bass here and there, but I just wasn't feeling uber confident about it. And so what I did is I decided to bounce up shallow. And I was fishing a lot of shallow wood. I was fishing areas that I thought the bass had just got done spawning, maybe were lingering around. And I caught some wolf pack bass. I was using a floating worm, a swim jig, catching some fish. but I still wasn't catching really the quality that I want. I had found one offshore school that had quality fish, but I didn't know you can't just have one spot in major tournaments like that. So anyways, one of these days I was bouncing between deeper water structure and shallow water cover, and I just so happened to idle across this giant flat. And on this flat, I noticed that there were some sprigs of grass. And this grass was relatively new. It was only in about 7 foot of water. It was about 4 or 5 foot tall. And it was kind of a mix of mostly hydrilla, a little bit of milfoil in there. And I just noticed it when I looked at my electronics. But guess what? All I did, I put 3 waypoints on it real quick because there was kind of a nice edge there. And then I went up and fished some shallow stuff. Well, anyways, I came back around after a little while and I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna make a couple of casts at that grass. I picked up a chatterbait and I didn't catch any fish on the chatterbait, but like I said, I always like to fish a worm of some sort before I leave an area. I picked up a big Texas rig worm, fired out there. The very first cast, I mean, a fish is pulling me into the grass. Now, this was in the practice and I didn't set the hook on this fish because there was a couple of boats within about 100 yards and I didn't want them to see me catching the fish. So I didn't really know how big the fish was. And so about 3 or 4 casts later, probably about 20 yards away from where I got that first bite, I got another bite. So I shook it off again and I left. Well, I came back there in the first day of the tournament and I caught 20 pounds of bass, a big bag. I was sitting in, I think, 5th place after the first day. And then I went back to that same exact grass the next day. I caught 14 pounds of bass. Not as much that day, couldn't get a big bite, but still caught a lot of fish there. By the next day, I came back, I made it to the championship Sunday, still in 5th place, and I actually caught 17 pounds plus of bass in this little grass area. And you know, I had loved fishing grass up until that moment, but really at that moment for me, it's where it clicked, where I'm like, dude, everywhere I go, when I go to a grass fishery, I'm gonna look for grass. And ever since then, it's what I primarily do. And I love it because of that. You can find these giant schools of bass in a really confined area. And like I said, sometimes forward-facing, you know, sonar doesn't help. And also, sometimes grass beats forward-facing sonar. And it's one of probably the only pieces of cover that really can do this. And so that's why I think, to me, it is the best thing that you can do when you go to a fishery, is look for some sort of grass. It really is kind of crazy. Now, before I let you go, I want to let you know about the one thing that I really look for when it comes to grass. The one thing that can really help you to catch a lot more fish. And that is, I like to look for a major irregularity. That's the biggest thing that I'm going to leave you with. And that can be so many different things. When you have a ton of grass, sometimes I've been to lakes like Lake Toho down in Florida, or I've been up to Lake Oneida up in New York, where you will find these areas that the whole thing is grass. But then all of a sudden, you will find a hole about the size of the garage I'm sitting in right now, about 30 foot by 60 foot, that's bare bottom. And down in Florida, I've noticed that that bare bottom can sometimes be shell beds, and it can also be bluegill beds, and it can also just be, I've even found rock piles. I've seen the exact same thing up at Oneida, where you find these holes, and what they are is they're like these little dinner plates. They're these little feeding zones for bass to be in, and you will be able to catch fish on a number of different baits in these holes. Now, on the complete opposite end of the spectrum, isolated, that's an irregularity. If you can find isolated grass clumps that time, that is what can be so good. I was just talking about Lake Chickamauga. The biggest thing about that particular tournament was there wasn't grass all over the lake like there has been in years past. The lake had come down in the winter, they had had floods, it had ripped out a lot of grass. I had found an isolated patch of grass that was somewhat protected. So it was some of the best grass on the lake. There was a ton of fish there. So irregularities, sometimes it's holes, sometimes it's isolation, sometimes it's a different type of cover within the grass. So there's a number of things that I really think are important. And guys, I'm gonna leave a link for actually 2 videos that I did over on Bass Fishing HQ. One is a video that I did on emergent vegetation. vegetation that comes out of the water, and over here is submergent vegetation, and that is water that is, or grass that's under the water. Both of these I really go into detail all about them. I hope you guys enjoy this video, and I will see you guys tomorrow.